This is a 1971 Schwinn Stingray apple crate. Metal flake green, banana seat, sissy bar, mustache handlebars, slick rear tire. And right here, mounted on the top tube where Detroit puts a gear lever, Schwinn put a gear lever. Because in 1971, your bicycle had a stick shift. That little stick had 5 forward gears and a chrome ball on top. And when you flipped it, you heard the same gear change click and LTD made in your father's driveway. The bike cost $86.95 in 1971 money, which is to say almost a week of factory wages, which is to say your father paid for this on layaway at Western Auto over 4 months. And every kid in your neighborhood knew. There are 13 things about this specific bike that no kid alive today would ever understand. Here is the list. One small correction before we start. $86.95 was the launch sticker on the very first Apple crate in 1968. By the model year we are walking through, the 1971 catalog list price for the Apple Crate 5-speed was actually $101.95. The single-speed coaster brake version was $82.95 that year. The manufacturing production wage in 1971, per the Bureau of Labor Statistics, was $3.45 an hour. 101.95 divided by 345 is just under 30 hours. Almost 4 full working days, about 80% of a week's take-home pay after taxes. A factory man bought this bike on layaway because he could not pay cash for it, and that is the truth of what the price tag meant. Number 1 is the stick shift itself. Schwinn called it that, spelled STIK-SHIFT in the 1968 catalog. The chrome ball, the 5 forward positions, the click between gears, were direct visual quotations of Detroit's Hurst floor shifters on the Pontiac GTO and the Plymouth Roadrunner. The 5-speed stick shift, however, did not debut on the Apple Crate. It first appeared 2 years earlier on the 1966 Schwinn Fastback. A 3-speed stick shift followed in the 1967 catalog. By the time the Apple Crate hit driveways in 1968, the part on the top tube was already 2 model years old, and the engineering crowd around Al Fritz at the Excelsior plant in Chicago had already worked the bugs out of the cable run. Fritz was the man who had brought the Stingray into existence in the first place. He had flown to California in 1962 on a hunch that the kid scene on the West Coast was about to change everything. He came back to Chicago and told the room, in his own words, "Something goofy is happening in California." His son Mike later said the design intent was to give kids too young to have a driver's license the chance to ride the Corvette of bicycles. The thing under the kid's right hand in 1971 was a serious piece of hardware. Imagine that today, a 9-year-old on a bicycle, shifting through 5 gears with a chrome-knobbed lever mounted 4 inches above his groin. There is no version of that bike that any American manufacturer would put on a showroom floor in 2026. The lever is the single most American thing about this bike. The lever is the proof that Schwinn looked at the same 9-year-old you would look at today and decided he was old enough to drive a 5-speed. Number 2 is the banana seat. It was 22 inches long. It was a single molded piece of vinyl over a steel frame. It was sprung on coils at the back, so it bounced when you sat down hard. 2 kids fit on it nose to tail with no problem. The kid in front pedaled. The kid in back sat with his hands on the sissy bar. There was no seatbelt. There was no rule. There was no helmet. The Smithsonian's catalog text for the 1965 Super Deluxe Stingray, accession number NMAH_843031, gift of Arnold, Schwinn and Company, describes it like this. The mass-produced Schwinn Stingray was an instant success. It was perfect for wheelies, and the banana seat accommodated the rider and his date. End quote. That is a federal institution's official catalog text. The bike was, by the Smithsonian's own description, a teenage dating implement built for children who could not yet legally date. Back then, that was so normal it was invisible. Today, no children's product made by a U.S. manufacturer would carry a designed-in second seat capacity that was not also a designed-in second seat restraint. Risk management would never permit it. Risk management did not exist in 1968. Number 3 is the sissy bar. the piece of chromed steel that arched up off the rear fender behind the banana seat, ranging in height anywhere from 12 inches to 22 inches, depending on the model and the year. The sissy bar protected nothing. It was a styling cue, copied direct from the high-rise sissy bars on Hell's Angels chopper Harleys, and Schwinn put it on a bicycle for 9-year-olds with a straight face. The sissy bar gave the second kid on the banana seat something to hold. It gave the first kid a backrest. It gave the bike its profile. Of course, it also doubled the stopping height of the bike if it tipped over. A kid going down sideways with a sissy bar on the back fell from an extra 18 inches. The bar caught fences, caught coats, caught the back of a kid's jacket on a swing-by. None of that was the bar's purpose. The bar's purpose was the same as the purpose of a fin on a 1959 Cadillac. The bar was the thing that said you were not riding a bike. You were riding a low-slung custom thing your father could not buy because the form factor did not exist for adults. Number 4 is the spokes. Specifically, what kids put in their spokes. A Topps baseball card. The cardboard 1971 Topps with the Yastrzemski or the Aaron or the Clemente on it, folded once and rubber banded against the chainstay so the leading edge of the card hit each spoke as the wheel turned. The card produced a continuous Doppler engine simulation. Every revolution of the wheel was a click. At cruising speed, it was a buzz. At full sprint downhill, it was the sound a Triumph motorcycle made starting up 2 driveways over. Believe it or not, the cards kids fed into their spokes in 1971, the 1971 Topps set, the 1971 Topps Greatest Moments insert, the high-numbered cards from Series 6 and 7, became, by the year 2025, some of the most valuable cardboard in the post-war hobby. A 1971 Topps Roberto Clemente PSA 10 sold at Heritage Auctions in 2024 for over $4,000. Your grandfather destroyed his by clipping it to the chainstay with a clothespin from his mother's laundry line. Topps had the baseball card market essentially to themselves in 1971. Fleer was largely shut out of full sets until 1981. Donruss did not enter the market until 1981. So when the script of this video says baseball cards, it means Topps. One brand, one set, folded once, snapped to the fork, burned to confetti by Labor Day. And just like that, the engine simulation became the bike's signature. The kid heard the bike before he saw it. The mother on the front step heard her own kid coming back from a friend's house from 2 blocks away. The neighbor down the street heard the buzz fade as the kid took the corner at the stop sign and shifted from second to third on the stick shift. The bike was, in 1971, an acoustic event. Bruce Brown's documentary On Any Sunday opened in theaters in July of 1971 with 4 minutes of neighborhood kids riding modified Stingrays through dirt, and the soundtrack of that opening sequence was, in the audio mix, partly the buzz of cards in the spokes. The cinematic Stingray sounded the way the actual driveway Stingray sounded. That sound is gone. Number 5 is the slick rear tire. The Schwinn stick-shift Stingray models, the crates especially, shipped with what Schwinn called a slick, a fat, treadless, drag strip-style rear tire mounted on a 16-inch rear wheel that was a full 4 inches smaller than the 20-inch front. The geometry was lifted directly from the rake and stretch of a top-fuel dragster. The slick was not engineered for stopping. The slick was engineered for wheelies on flat asphalt. The narrow front wheel kept the steering light. The fat rear tire gave the bike a planted footprint when the kid stood on the pedals and dropped the chain into first gear. The braking, on a 5-speed crate before late 1971, was a drum hub up front and a caliper at the rear. Disc brakes started appearing on Apple Crate 5-speeds in late 1971 for the 1972 model year. Try doing that today. Try selling a child's bicycle in any catalog, in any market, in any state in the United States that ships with a designed-in performance slick on a 16-inch rear wheel meant for wheelies. The product liability lawyer would close the file in 3 minutes. In 1971, the lawyer did not exist yet. The slick was the bike's calling card. Number 6 is the mustache handlebar. The bend of it, the rise of it, the way it put your hands chest high and your face 4 to 6 inches above the front tire. The mustache bar arched up from the stem, peaked, and came back down. It was a 13-degree backsweep on the average Stingray. The geometry put the rider's center of gravity high and forward of the seat. That geometry is what made the wheelie easy. It is also what made the over-the-bars crash easy. When the front tire hit anything, a curb, a stick, a sewer grate, a fissure in the asphalt the city had been promising to patch for 2 summers, the kid went over the top, and his face arrived first. There was no chin guard. There was no helmet on his head. There was a Schwinn head badge stamped Chicago 8 inches from his nose, and there was the lip of the asphalt about half a foot below that. Looking back, the geometry was the first thing a kid learned to respect. A 1971 Apple crate did not crash forgivingly. A 1971 Apple crate crashed face first. Now here is where it gets really wild. The first 6 items on this list were the parts you saw the second you laid eyes on the bike. The remaining 7 are the parts you learned about by living with it. The next thing on this list is the one most 60-year-old men in America still have the scar from, somewhere on the inside of their right shin. Number 7 is the spring-loaded kickstand. The Schwinn factory-installed kickstand on a Stingray was a heavy gauge of formed steel, weighted at the bottom, sprung at the pivot, so that when you nudged it up with your heel, it slammed back against the chainstay with the percussive bite of a metal trap closing. When you nudged it down to park the bike, the spring released and the leg of the stand came down hard. If your shin was anywhere in the path, and on a low-slung kid's bike, your shin was always in the path, the kickstand caught it on the way down. The scar most men in their late 50s and early 60s have on the inside of their right shin is from a Schwinn kickstand. There is no federal data on this. There is no academic study. There is no NEISS injury entry titled Bike Kickstand Shin Laceration. There is only the family memory and the small white line. Every man who owned a Stingray knows the scar. Every man who owned one knows exactly which day in which summer he got it. Number 8 is the paint. The metal flake paint Schwinn put on the crates was Honduras maroon over a pearl base on the apple crate, Coast yellow over pearl on the lemon peeler, cool orange over pearl on the orange crate, campus green over pearl on the pea picker, and a hard high-gloss white on the cotton picker. There was a 6th crate, and the brief you may have heard about this bike does not mention it, the Gray Ghost. Silver mist with black tape stripes, produced for 1 model year only, 1971. The Gray Ghost was on sale in catalogs and dealer showrooms for 1 calendar year, and then it was gone. That means in the spring of 1971, walking into a Schwinn dealership in any American city, you could see all 6 crate colors in a row on the same floor at the same time. Apple crate, lemon peeler, orange crate, pea picker, cotton picker, Gray Ghost. 6 metal flake muscle bikes for 9-year-olds, lined up like a Detroit dealership had collapsed into the kids section. Believe it or not, the cotton picker, the white one, was only sold for 2 model years, 1970 and 1971, before it quietly disappeared from the lineup. Schwinn never publicly explained why. The name did not age well. The Gray Ghost reappeared in 2017 as a limited reissue at Dick's Sporting Goods, 1,400 units, $399. They sold out fast. The original 1971 Gray Ghost at auction in 2022 went for around $4,000. 40-year-old men cried at the auction block. Their wives stood 3 feet behind them and pretended they did not see. Number 9 is the chain guard. The Schwinn Stingray chain guard was a fully wrapped sheet steel cover that ran the full length of the chainring and chainstay, and the Schwinn script logo was stamped or silkscreened into the upper face of it in 2-inch high letters. You could read the word Schwinn from across the street. That was the point of the chain guard. The chain guard did mechanically what every chain guard does. It kept pant cuffs out of the chain. But the chain guard also did, for Schwinn, what the wide chrome tail fin did for Cadillac. It carried the brand visibly into the world. The kid riding past your house was advertising Schwinn at 15 miles per hour from 150 feet away. No other bike company in America used the chain guard that way. The Murray bikes from Ohio had a small decal. The Huffy bikes from Dayton had a tiny pressed-in mark. The Western Flyer house brand at Western Auto had a stamped Flyer logo half an inch tall. Only Schwinn made the chain guard into a billboard. And in 1971, in a country where 90% of household appliances were still manufactured domestically, a child's bicycle advertising Schwinn at curb speed was a small, rolling assertion that American manufacturing existed and could be touched. The reinforcement came from the television set, too. CBS Captain Kangaroo had been a Schwinn sponsor since 1958. Every weekday morning, Bob Keeshan, in the bowl haircut and the deep-pocketed jacket, delivered the on-air line to a generation of children. "Schwinn bikes," he said, "the quality bikes are best." That tagline ran live, in Keeshan's own voice, until 1971. In 1971, the Federal Trade Commission issued its staff report on children's advertising, and the rules changed. Beginning in 1972, Keeshan was no longer permitted to personally endorse the product. The role passed to a fictional character called Mr. Schwinn Dealer. The 1971 Stingray you were looking at sat exactly on the inflection point. It was the last model year in which a child watching CBS could hear the friendly grown-up on the morning show personally vouch for the bike his father had paid for on layaway. The next year, the rule changed. Today's kid does not know what an on-air personal endorsement of a children's bicycle from the host of a national morning show would even sound like. The advertising regime that produced that voice was gone within 12 months of the bike you were looking at coming off the assembly line. Number 10 is the head badge. The chrome shield mounted on the front of the steering tube, just above the down tube, just below the handlebar stem. On a 1971 Stingray, the head badge was a riveted brass piece with the Schwinn script in raised letters and, stamped below, in smaller block type, the word Chicago. Imagine that today, a consumer product with a city name stamped into the metal as proof of origin. Today, the back of nearly every consumer product made for the American market reads "Made in China," "Made in Vietnam," assembled in Mexico from U.S. and imported parts. In 1971, a kid's bicycle said Chicago in raised brass. The Schwinn-Costner Avenue plant on the west side of Chicago was a 14-acre facility that, at its peak in 1970, employed nearly 2,000 workers. The Costner Avenue plant rolled out its last Schwinn in 1982 and closed for good in 1983. 1,800 people were laid off when production moved to giant manufacturing in Taiwan. The brass head badge that said Chicago on the front of a 1971 Apple crate outlived the factory by more than 40 years. The factory is now light industrial space. The plot where the loading dock used to be is now a Walgreens warehouse. The head badge is still on the bike. Number 11 is the warranty. Schwinn frames in 1971 carried a genuine lifetime warranty to the original purchaser. Not 5 years, not 10 years, not the period of demonstrable defect. Lifetime. If the frame cracked, the Schwinn dealer in your town replaced it. If the welds let go, the dealer welded them or pulled a new frame off the rack. The vintage forums have testimony from owners who rode the same Schwinn frame for 35 years and got a free replacement in 1984 when the seat stay finally let go. The warranty was tied to the Independent Bicycle Dealer Network, which was the channel Schwinn had built its post-war growth on. Your father walked into the same shop every spring with the bike for a tune-up. The dealer knew your father's name. The dealer knew the bike. The dealer had probably sold it to him. The lifetime warranty was not a piece of paper folded into a box. It was a relationship between a small business on a corner in your town and a manufacturer in Chicago. There is no consumer product manufactured in America today, in the children's category, that carries a lifetime warranty actually honored at the point of purchase by an independent dealer with no friction. The warranty died with the company. When Schwinn filed Chapter 11 on October 7, 1992, in the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Northern District of Illinois, assets $117 million, liabilities $82 million, monthly loss $1 million. The lifetime warranty became unsecured paper. The kid who had bought a Stingray in 1971 and was now 30 was holding a warranty whose backer was in court. The dealer who had handled the warranty for 21 years was, in many cases, still standing behind it personally. The warranty died. The dealer's word did not always. Dean Adams, who was 13 in 1971, later wrote that he had needed his blue Stingray as much as oxygen, and that his dealer had financed it at $2 a week for a year. $2 a week, from the dealer, direct, no bank involved. That was how a children's bicycle got financed in 1971, and that was how the warranty got kept. Number 12 is the porch. The way you carried the bike up the porch steps every night because nobody locked anything. The 1971 Apple Crate was a 50-pound bicycle. The kid who owned it was sometimes 80 pounds himself. He carried it up the steps because his father said, "Carry it up the steps." He carried it up the steps because the rain at 3 in the morning would rust the chain. He carried it up the steps because that was what you did. There was no bike rack. There was no kryptonite lock. The U-lock was not invented until 1971 by Stanley Kaplan in New York City. And even then, it took 10 years to reach suburban hardware stores in volume. The Schwinn 5-speed Apple Crate sat on the porch of 1 million American houses every night between 1968 and 1973. Unlocked, untethered, in plain view from the street, and nobody walked off with it. Of course, there were exceptions. There was always the kid in the neighborhood whose bike got taken, and there was always the eventual recovery. The bike on the curb 3 blocks over, somebody's older brother having joy-ridden it home. But the structural fact of the porch, and the unlocked bike, and the street light overhead, and the row of houses with their doors unlocked, is so foreign to the year we are sitting in that it sounds like a story made up. It is not made up. It is on tens of thousands of family photographs from the early 70s. The bike on the porch. Nobody watching it. Nobody had to. The porch step in front of 50 million American houses was, for the better part of a decade, the world's largest unguarded bicycle lot. The economic value of a 1971 Apple Crate in $2,026 is about $830. In 1971 dollars, the equivalent of a 40-inch flat-screen television. And the kid left it on the porch all night, every night, for 4 years, because the structural assumption of his neighborhood was that nobody would touch it. That assumption is the thing that has been deleted from American life. Not the bike, the assumption. Number 13 is what killed it. Not one thing, 3 things in sequence, stacked across the years 1974 to 1992. Domino 1 was the brand new Consumer Product Safety Commission. The CPSC had been created by federal statute in October of 1972 and had begun real operations in 1973. On July 16, 1974, the CPSC published the Federal Bicycle Safety Standard, 16 CFR Part 1512, with an effective date of January 1, 1975. Buried in the regulation, at Section 1512.4 subsection G, was a clause called the excluded area. The clause banned protrusions in the rider impact zone, the area between the saddle and the handlebar where a rider in a forward crash would come down. The stick shift, mounted on the top tube, was exactly such a protrusion. Period riders had been calling it the crotch buster for years. The CPSC standard did not name the part. The CPSC standard described the zone. The zone described the stick shift. By 1975, the top tube shifter was gone from the catalog, replaced by a handlebar-mounted thumb shifter. Domino 2 was BMX. Bruce Brown's documentary On Any Sunday had opened in theaters in July of 1971, with 4 minutes of neighborhood kids riding modified Stingrays through California dirt. And that opening sequence became the cultural ignition point for the BMX wave. BMX bicycle sales in the United States went from 140,000 bikes in 1974 to 1.75 million bikes by 1977. 12 times the volume in 3 years. Schwinn famously called BMX a flash in the pan and did not ship a real Stingray-derived BMX frame, the Scrambler, until 1975, and a true BMX geometry not until later. Domino 3 was the company itself. Schwinn fought the imports for the rest of the 70s. Schwinn lost the trade restraint case United States versus Arnold Schwinn & Company, 388 U.S. 365, decided June 12, 1967, when Justice Abe Fortas held that Schwinn's territorial restrictions on its dealer network were per se illegal under the Sherman Act. That ruling was overturned by Continental TV versus GTE Sylvania in 1977. Too late to save the dealer model. The original Stingray ran in the catalog from 1963 through 1981, with inventory tail into 1982. The crates specifically ended in 1973. Schwinn filed Chapter 11 in October of 1992. The Costner plant in Chicago was already gone. Last bike off the line in 1982, doors locked in 1983. By the time the bankruptcy court took the case, the Stingray had been out of production for 11 years, and the kid who had owned one was now 31 years old, with a mortgage and a station wagon, and a kid of his own who rode a fluorescent yellow plastic Huffy from the discount store. An Apple Crate Stingray, 1971, in working order with the stick shift intact, was listed on Marketplace last week for $1,800. The seller's profile photo was him at 63, standing next to the bike, holding the gear lever in his right hand. He learned to ride on this bike. He learned to crash on it. He learned to fix it. He learned that something his father bought for $86.95 on layaway was worth carrying up the porch every night because nobody locked anything, because nobody had to. The bike outlived the company. The kid outlived the factory. The stick shift still works.